welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be fixing some of the issues I've had with the trigger on the Nerf Rival Finisher.
Okay, so this is, I believe, the fourth video for this blaster, and what I'm going to be doing today is fixing the trigger. I've been having an issue, right there it goes, where the trigger sticks. There, it popped back out. And this has to do with the fact that this is a cheap rival blaster, so to save money, which, I guess this saves money, they didn't put an actual return spring on the trigger. The trigger has a little plastic piece. Now, I've already taken this apart multiple times. It was sticking a little bit whenever I first got it, and once, there it goes again, and once I started doing modifications to it, I threw a ton of grease in there. And it stopped for a little bit, but the second that grease gets totally pushed out, i.e. during continual use, it starts to stick again. So as I'm like setting up barriers and targets and going through and training for what will hopefully be the return of Nerf wars once the apocalypse calms down, maybe, this starts sticking. So if it's sticking in an optimal situation, i.e. I'm not under any stress, I'm not competing against anybody except for myself, I'm just shooting targets, this is catastrophic in a war situation. And overall, I don't think this is a bad blaster. If I really did, I wouldn't be doing all these videos, but it just needs some love and improvement. And that's kind of my whole issue here, is that yeah, I saved money by paying $15 for this, but at the same time, I have to spend a lot of hours getting it dialed in the way I want. And this is true of a lot of blasters, but for me, generally not rival. All I really have to do is usually throw a spring in it, occasionally reinforce some part of the shell, and I'm done. Some of the stuff I've done in other videos was showed the stock and stock mount, and I have not shown this in any of the previous 3 videos on this, but I did put a sling mount on here, and that is actually from a hammer shot, specifically the hammer shot mod I did involving the Maverick shell in a recent video. If you want, you can go check that out. And just filling in some cosmetic stuff on here, extended the mag release a little bit, and fiddled around with the internals. I talked about this stuff in other videos, but now we're going to crack this open to see if I can do anything about this trigger. What I'm hoping I can do is basically cut off and remove that plastic piece and glue in a port to hold a screw and glue in a nub on the trigger to mount a spring. Hopefully I can do that without a whole lot of modification, drilling, sanding, drilling, etc. Yeah, so that's the whole trigger system right there. Figure if I can zip this off, maybe mount the trigger stop to this piece here, or sorry, the spring stop to this piece here, and then an actual spring post in here. And yeah, I think that might actually work quite well, hopefully. After going through my spring bin, I have selected these 4 springs. These 2 are definitely the softest, but these 2 here are pretty strong, and they're pretty much the exact right length that I want. This one here is definitely the stronger of the two. It actually has less coils but more resilience. I'm figuring either one of these should be pretty much perfect. So now I just have to find a piece to make the spring stop, a little nub, and something to hold the spring. Okay, so I've assembled all of my basic parts that I'm going to need here. And my spring, I cut a piece out of a raptor strike shell, right from there actually, to make the actual stopper for the spring. And then I cut off a screw port that I'm going to glue onto the trigger. I'm going to snip this off, glue in my pieces. Before I glue any areas though, I'm going to sand it first. I'm going to glue everything using crazy glue or super glue, and I'll reinforce around it with some baking soda. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get to it. Trigger is done. Everything feels solid. The stop for the spring is glued in and feels completely solid. And here you can take a gander at what I did to get this in. I just glued it in place, backfilled the grip, and then dremeled out there so that I had, and filed. I didn't just do all that with the Dremel. A lot of that was done with a hand file, but filed that down so that it's attached on one side and just loosely there on the other. And all this feels pretty responsive, snappy, and good. I didn't actually measure this, but it stops pretty much perfectly, exactly where I need it. So that's awesome. Now, let's see how it's going to work whenever I put it all back together. So a lot of people complained about this trigger in the reviews. They didn't like that it was straight. And I mean, honestly, this feels way different now that I have a spring instead of that weird torsion piece of plastic. And no matter how I've been sitting here fiddling with it for like 2 minutes off camera, and I also loaded up and fired 12 shots through it, but I cannot get the trigger to stick or jam up like it was. But I can say this, it is so much better. It feels so much better. I mean, it just is like night and day. So, okay, enough yammering and time-lapse footage and blah blah blah. Let's go fire some rounds through this. Okay, that was a bunch of good, clean, safe fun. But yeah, the best way I can think of to describe how this trigger feels after shooting it a couple hundred times compared to having the original is that when you're squeezing it, it has a very strange compression compared to a Strife trigger, say, or a long shot, or really anything, whether it's flywheel or otherwise. What it kind of reminds me of is like the Big Shock. Is how, as far as how it felt cheap and unresponsive to an extent, and sluggish. I mean, obviously it's jamming and sticking, but I mean, there's just such a difference in between the feeling of this putting that weird pressure on the trigger, and I feel like with its straight design and the way it has this lip here on the bottom on either side is part of what was causing it to dig in and stick. Now I can't get it to stick no matter what I do. And it feels right too. Like I say, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's the difference between like this weird compression feeling like this and between like a nice, smooth, straightforward, straight back. So if you really, really hate the straightness of the trigger, just don't buy this blaster, or give it away, or take it to Goodwill, or sell it, I guess. But if it's honestly not so much the straightness, but the feeling, because the thing is, with the flat straight trigger, I thought it was gonna hurt my finger, but it is so well rounded that I don't ever have any problem. And I've got this interesting motion down with this trigger where I kind of slide my finger down the trigger instead of pulling it straight back. So maybe that's why I like it. I don't know. But yeah, hopefully this video gave you guys some ideas, helped you out if you happen to have this problem with your finisher and it just drives you crazy. Or if it sticks. That's not an issue of like, oh, I don't like the way the trigger feels. That's an issue of my blaster doesn't work, Hasbro. My blaster doesn't work, Nerf. So yeah.
Okay, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this video. As always, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, have a great day.